What's up, Whoopers? It's Vice here, and I'm going to talk to you about my weekend run with the deck that you're seeing over here, Gardevoir EX. So, I decided to run it back this weekend at a couple of league challenges that happened recently. And can I just take a moment to say that I'm so happy to see the League Cup and League Challenge tier of events come back. I've got a bit to say about it. I've got some thoughts to share about why this tier of event is so important, even though it's the lowest on the ladder, the lowest on the rung. First off, I thought I'd just go over how I went over the weekend and the list that I played and the matchups that I faced. So, on the Saturday, the first league challenge was in a suburb called Morayfield, which is about a 45-minute drive away from where I live. And I've never been to the store before, so I didn't know what to expect. It was great to arrive, new faces, old faces that I'm familiar with, in a new store that I've never been in before. It's really cool to see all these stores that sort of didn't exist pre-pandemic, before the shutdown of Premier events in 2020, now coming to the fore, having their chance to run Premier events and give our locals a chance to compete for championship points. So, the League Challenge itself had a pretty decent turnout, somewhere between 20 and 30. I believe it was enough to pay out points to top 8, so that was great to see. What I played was a Gardevoir list, which is what you're seeing to the left here. The only difference between this list that you're seeing and the one that I played on the Saturday is that I was still running the double Miriam. So I wasn't running the Lumineon. Instead, I had 2 Miriam in the list. I really like Miriam. Miriam's a really cool card. And I feel like Gardevoir, being a deck that's often attacking with the Gardevoir or with Cresselia and just Pokemon that don't withstand more than one hit, is really interesting and really handy to have access to a supporter that can just instantly retrieve those cards, put them back in your deck, and as a draw 3 on top of all of that. So sometimes I would just play it to get a Ralts back from getting knocked out at the start of a game or something like that. Sometimes you have awkward prizing, you need to recover Pokemon a little earlier than your game plan would normally allow for. So I like having the flexibility. I conceded after the tournament that I would need to make room for a Lumineon. I'll get into why in just a sec. So, sit down at Centurion, round 1. I'm up against a Lost Box deck, which is a pretty familiar theme. If anyone out there has been playing standard format since rotation, Lost Box is pretty hot right now. It's pretty popular. There's a lot of different ways to play it. The way that my opponent was playing it in round 1 was quite unique, actually. They chose to include a package that had Galarian Moltres, the one that does more damage the more prizes your opponent has taken. So, very, very interesting. Obviously, being able to attack with the Dark-type attacker is quite cool. It can power itself up without needing Mirage Gate, which is kind of handy as well. You know, Gardevoir EX is weak to Dark. Mew VMAX is weak to Dark. Very interesting strategy. I was able to beat my opponent. They made like a couple of misplays here and there, but more importantly, I was just able to keep them sort of underfoot with Gardevoir. Just consistent setup, using Cresselia, all of that sort of thing. Cresselia is a really important tool to be able to withstand the onslaught of Cramorant in the early game, which if you play the deck for a while against meta decks, you'll come to understand and appreciate the 120 HP that Cresselia has. It's quite important. It's why I say that, like, no matter how much HP comes into the game, the differences in competitive viability is always within 10s and 20s of HP. So, anyway, that was round 1. I won that 2-0, and then in round 2, I played against a Gardevoir mirror match. So this opponent was from even further north in Queensland, and they came down to play in the Centurion Challenge. They were playing the Gardevoir, and interestingly, they played the Mirage Step Kirlia, so that did come into it in our second game, where they looked like they were having a tough time setting up, and they just evolved into the Mirage Step Kirlia and flooded their board with Kirlia. Quite resilient, having access to that tool. Thankfully, I was able to take them down in our game. Just this Gardevoir list is really good at empowering you to take down whatever threats that you need to. Zacian V being able to take out full HP EX Pokemon by pumping it with enough energy to do so, and you being able to use Cresselia to snipe out Ralts and Kirlia is very important too. So I was 2-0. Going into the third round was another Gardevoir mirror, and kind of similarly, I was able to keep them under control by locking them out of their Gardevoir EX. So, you know, not similar line of play where I use Cresselia a lot, but what was really important is that they unfortunately overbenched on their board. They only had room for one Ralts at a time, so I was knocking out the lone Ralts every turn with Moonglow Reverse and preventing them from ever getting an EX into play before it was too late. So 3-0 at that point. Going to the fourth round, and I'm up against a local Swiss demon, Max, with Lost Box. So they are a very, very skilled player and very good and adept at playing Lost Box. Very straightforward standard list. It's got the Dragonite EX and Dragonite V rather, and the Sky Seal Stone, and just like all the good stuff that Lost Box can use to beat you. Hawlucha makes Lost Box really strong against Gardevoir as well. Allows it to hit numbers that it otherwise wouldn't be able to via the Hawlucha damage counter placement. So unfortunately, it lost 2-0 in pretty sudden fashion to the Lost Box, to be honest. In one of the games, I dead drew like crazy, and so that was the reason why I decided I needed to include the Lumineon for the next day. Going into round 4, I played against another Lost Box. This time, however, my opponent was playing Sablezard, so a little easier for me to deal with. You know, you don't have the Greninja to have to worry about, because the fourth round Lost Box Max was playing Greninja. You have to put Manaphy into play. You put Manaphy into play, it means that it becomes a target for Sableye. So it becomes quite difficult to deal with that version of Lost Box as Gardevoir. But Sablezard, on the other hand, is something that I can maintain a pretty steady board against and take out. So I finished that tournament at 4-1. That was good enough for second place, so I was able to net 12 championship points. Pretty successful day overall. I'd take second place any day of the week at any tournament. So next day was at another store that I've never played in called Broken Vase, which is out west. It's to the west of Brisbane, about less than a 30-minute drive for me, so not too bad at all. There's a bunch of like highways and tunnels that lead out from where I live in Brisbane, so it can be pretty quick getting to a few of these places, even though they seem a little bit far away. So I got there, a bunch of familiar faces once again, and some people that I'd never met before, which was great. And it was a 4-round tournament this time, so not that many people turned up for this league challenge, but still enough for a pretty decent-sized Swiss event for Masters. 4 rounds. So let me get to it. I sat down and I played against a Miraidon Regieleki VMAX deck from all the way down on the Gold Coast, which is about an hour and a bit drive away. And this game did not go well for me. Usually I'm pretty confident against Miraidon. You know, the line of play is you just... so they were playing like the Magnezone in their list. So you put down the Manaphy. They use Magnetic Tension on the Manaphy to knock it out. You knock out the Magnezone, and then you go from there. Right? So that's the line of play that I always take against Miraidon. Usually it works out well. But the deck kind of betrayed me a little. It was just like a little inconsistent in different moments. So unfortunately, my first game was a bit of a wash. I had to scoop it up in the first like 5 minutes, and then after that I was able to win a game, and then we sort of didn't have enough time for a game 3, so it was a draw. Tough luck. You just shake it off and move on. At least, like, you know, I'm sort of sneaking under that undefeated range of players, right? So going to round 2, I'm up against Gardevoir Mirror, and I beat the Gardevoir Mirror. I can't really remember now how the games went, but it's a mirror match, right? So I've talked about this a few times already. You rely on Cresselia to snipe out their board, you know, trim it out, make it harder for them to establish multiple stage 2s, and put the pressure on, whilst only providing a basic attacker yourself, so keeping your board across and steady. And so like I won 2 games there and went into round 3 and faced another Gardevoir deck, a local player there on the Gardevoir, and much of the same. Now, what I do remember vividly from this game is at the end of the first game, it was a very long game 1. At the end of the first game, I made a play where I had something like a Kirlia on the bench, and I had a Gardevoir EX on the bench as well. I powered something up, ready to attack, and then I used Collapsed Stadium to get rid of my own Gardevoir EX and remove any 2 prizes from the board. So that was really important a really important line to take, because it meant that my opponent couldn't construct a way to win the game for sure on that turn. Like, they couldn't go Boss's Orders, 10 energy on a Zacian, and then KO the Gardevoir, right? So I was able to lock up that game. Really proud of myself for the way that I played that one. And then there wasn't sort of enough time to complete a full game 2. So I won that game. And then going into the last round, who would I face? None other than the Lost Box deck player that I played against in round 4. Yes, the day before. It was Max again on the Lost Box deck again. And we played it again. This time, however, I was able to win game 1. So I think that I just ran away with it game 1. I was able to hit Judge at the right time. I was able to hit Roxanne twice that game at the right time in order to keep the Lost Box player from just having everything every single time. And I think going forward, I'm going to have to look for ways to include more ways to disrupt my opponent, because disrupting Lost Box seems to be the only quasi-reliable way of beating a very skilled and adept Lost Box player. So I was able to win game 1 thanks to Judge, Roxanne, Pal Pad, Roxanne, and just make it really difficult for them to close it out. Game 2, they beat me pretty handily, and then game 3, we sort of just didn't have enough time to finish, so that game ended up in a tie. I finished the day 2 wins, 2 draws, and that was good enough for 5th place. So unfortunately, no championship points for me. I got very close to getting championship points, but unfortunately a miss there. So, but that's okay. There'll be more opportunities. I believe I have another league challenge coming up at the end of this week on the Gold Coast. So going to be a bit of a drive for that one, but looking forward to it all the same. Pretty successful weekend, I would say. Being able to finish in the points in at least one of the challenges is pretty good by me. So I'm really enjoying Gardevoir, and this is the list that I played yesterday with the Lumineon. Lumineon did come in handy, I will say. It did win me a couple of games, or was able to contribute to winning those games for sure. So definitely including this in future. And then I think going forward, I'll have to find a way to include more Judge, because this card is really important at slowing down the Lost Box players out there. The other thing I want to talk about, and I think I'm going to go big mode for this one. I'm going to go big mode. I just want to talk about the return of local events in general. And so now that I've shared my weekend with you and how I went at the league challenges, I just want to share a quick thought about the return of league challenges and league cups. And I think it's really great that they've come back. There are a lot of opinions and thoughts about why it's good for the game that at the lowest level, finally the entry level events have returned and people can start trundling along that pathway towards higher tier events or becoming more engaged competitive players. For me, I think what's really important about the League Challenge and League Cup level is something, it's kind of like a smaller version of the competitive narratives that you see spoken about at the regional and international levels. So if you watch the broadcast teams, if you watch the broadcasts and listen to what the casters have to say, they're always talking about the competitive histories of players, where they've come from to be there. They celebrate and they talk about their past achievements and talk about how these players are all vying for points and things like that. And so I think that everybody sort of wants to be in the spotlight, even in a small way, right? And that's what League Challenges and League Cups do. They create like a really accessible and realistic, I would say. I'm going to hazard and use the word realistic way for your average player to aim for points and to aim for a result that they can be proud of. You know, at the League Challenge and League Cup level, you're competing against the players that you know. So you're in an environment that is a little bit more familiar, a little bit more comfortable. And I feel like it lets the average player feel like they're the main character for once. If you're just a competitive player that likes to play, but maybe you've never gotten, maybe you're not paying for coaching. Maybe you're not grinding every night to improve at the game because you've got other responsibilities, you've got work, you've got family, you've got whatever, right? At a regionals, you go and you have fun. Maybe you want to try and go for a positive record, but I don't think it would be unrealistic to say that, or I don't think it would be realistic to say that you want to make top 8, right? It might be unrealistic to expect that, or maybe it's underestimating just how good the really skilled players are. There's a reason why you see the same names at the top tables most of the time. I won't say every time, because Pokemon can be a really unforgiving game at times, and sometimes you'll just have a blowout, and that's one of the things that makes it so compelling. But all of that aside, the League Challenge and League Cup level does let you feel like you're the main character. You're up against players that may not be globetrotters, but they might be your local rivals. And you get to build those local rivalries and create your own narratives in your own local area. You just listened to me talk about my weekend and told you about how I've had a couple of games now against a local player, Max, who's really good at the game, and we're able to compete against each other and try and figure out how to beat each other and things like that. I'm lucky enough to have Natalie Miller as one of my local players as well, and she's world-renowned. All I want to say is that I think it's really great that the lower tier events are back, and well, look, my arms disappeared here. Wow, look at that. I just noticed that. All I wanted to say is really great that the lower tier events are back, and I highly encourage you to maybe start heading to your local events and maybe forging your own story at these events. So look, if you enjoy Pokemon card content, hearing about competitive events, seeing weird random rogue or fun decks, consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.